Good morning. Welcome to a new week and another series of Anchored in the Word Morning Reflections. As you can hear, I've been fighting something for a little bit, and hopefully by the end of this next week, I'll be back 100%. But I'm very thankful for what we're working on this week, and that is a missions focus. And throughout the month of October, we're going to look at several different churches that were planted in the first century. We're going to see how God worked in those specific cities, how God worked through the individuals that were influential in those church plants, and then the timeless truths, the principles that should really motivate us as we continue the Lord's work in our time period. This morning, what we're going to do is talk about some introductory thoughts on this church plant at Corinth. We're going to see God's providence and the power of the gospel in a very dark, a very pagan city. So if you have a Bible, I'd like to ask you to take it and let's turn together to Acts chapter 18. We're going to read the first portion of this passage and then give you a little bit of information about the background of Corinth as a city and just kind of help us get a little bit of perspective about why it was such a significant thing that an influential church was established in that city. Here's what the text says. After these things, Paul departed from Athens and came to Corinth and found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately come from Italy, with his wife Priscilla, because that Claudius had commanded all Jews to depart from Rome. And he came unto them, and because he was of the same craft, he abode with them and wrought, for by their occupation they were tent makers. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and persuaded the Jews and the Greeks. And when Silas and Timotheus were come from Macedonia, Paul was pressed in the Spirit, and he testified to the Jews that Jesus was Christ. Now, to appreciate the significance of this church plant in Corinth, I think it's helpful to know a little bit about the city of Corinth, the history that was there, and really the dynamics that were a part of that city. And one of the reasons I do that is to help you to realize sometimes we look at the times that we're living in and we say, this is the worst time in history. The gospel can't change our society, our city, our communities. And the fact is it can. And we see that in the ancient world, it was a very dark time. We talk about Corinth. Corinth was a city with a rich, fascinating history. And that history is what made it the city that it was in the first century. About 200 years before the time of Paul, Corinth was a thriving city. In fact, it was in a unique location on an isthmus between two major bodies of water. And so you had a port on each side of where the city was, and this was a place where people would drag product over the isthmus, and Corinth was right in the center of that. But that city got in trouble with the Romans, and about 100 years before Paul came, the city was completely destroyed. And when it was destroyed, it was left as a wasteland for about 100 years. But during the time of Julius Caesar, the city was rebuilt. And when Caesar rebuilt that city, his desire was to make this one of those beautiful ancient cities, one that was a Roman colony where money would flow and people would be attracted, and it would be an extremely prosperous location. And so that's what Corinth became. It became a Roman colony with a special status, and it attracted a diverse group of people, and it was an extremely wealthy, affluent society. It was a cosmopolitan city. When people came to that city, they had all kinds of opportunities, and their cultures that had kept them all distinct and unique from one another kind of fell by the wayside, and all of their roots from other parts of the world were kind of laid to the side, and there was a very uniquely Corinthian way of life. You say, well, what was that Corinthian way of life? Well, it was a thoroughly pagan way of life. And I know that paganism was predominant all throughout the Greco-Roman world, but it was especially true in Corinth. It was a very licentious society. It attracted people who were very ambitious. They were very wealthy and very hedonistic. It was a city where people wanted freedom. Not just freedom in the political sense, but freedom in every sense of the word. And so when we talk about this city, we're talking about a city that would have been very similar to some of the most prosperous cities in the world today. Cities where people are attracted there because they can make money. They're attracted there to get away from something back in their former countries or communities. And they have this distinctly hedonistic way of life. And that is the kind of city that Paul came to, where Paul preached the gospel. And the question is, could a wealthy city, a hedonistic city, a pagan city, become a city that has a strong church? And the answer is, if God wants it to be, it can be. And so that's what we see. An athletic city, a shrewd political city, a city with money, a city with affluence, and a city that was dark and needed Christ. Why do we start here? Because this is where God planted Paul. And he planted him for 18 months at least. And this is a place where a church is born. And this is a place that was very influential in lots of our New Testament books. So when we talk about the text we're going to look at this week, what we're going to talk about is the birth of a church, the church of Corinth, which becomes a powerful testimony to the kind providence of God, the power of the gospel, and how God in his providence takes light into the darkness and accomplishes his purposes. As we dig into this text, I think that we will see the need to take comfort in the way that God governs in the ordinary course of our lives. God can use us in the time we're living, in the place we're living, in a similar way to the way that he did with the Apostle Paul. So I hope that you join us this week as we dig into this passage, as we talk about the struggles, the triumphs, the setbacks, and ultimately an evidence to the mighty hand of God. Have a blessed rest of your day. Lord willing, we'll meet again tomorrow as we start digging into this passage. Bye now.